But did he have a viewer sight? A definite viewer sight? And that is also very important. And let us speak about this. Whether people had the viewer sight. Throughout the Muslim disputing the question of succession at the courtyard of Bani Sa and in the mosque, the Prophet's remains were lying on his grave. The Prophet's remains was still there, It's quite some time now, after his death. After they saw Abu Bakr, the people came to the Prophet's house to prepare for his funeral and funeral. There was disagreement as to where the Prophet was to be buried. Some Muhajirun advised that he ought to be buried in Makkah, his native town, in the proximity of his own relatives. Others advised that he ought to be buried in Jerusalem, where the prophets were buried before him. The latter was certainly a baffling view, considering that Jerusalem was in the hands of the Byzantines, and the relations between them and the Muslims were most hostile, especially since the Mu'tah and Tabuk campaigns. Indeed, an army which the Prophet himself had mobilized and placed under the leadership of Usamah was supposed to fight them and avenge the Muslims' defeat at those campaigns. At any rate, the proposals to bury the remains in Makkah or in Jerusalem were both good. So they were not thinking of where to bury him. Jerusalem. Anyway, Jerusalem is our, because the people who were in Jerusalem were the Byzantines, and they were against the Muslims. They thought that the most appropriate place was either the very spot of ground where the pulpit stood or the spot next to it. The opinion, however, did not meet with approval. Aisha had related that in his last days, whenever his pain increased, the Prophet used to uncover his face to curse such people as had taken the grave of their prophets as places of worship. Abu Bakr solved the issue when he proclaimed that he had heard the Prophet say that the Prophet should be buried wherever they died. The opinion carried the day. Maybe he goes back and says, Abu Bakr said, I heard he say that wherever the Prophet died, there he buried him. So, washing the Prophet's body before burial was performed by his next of kin, by Ali ibn Abu Talib, Al-Abbas ibn Abal Talib, and his two sons, Al-Fadil and Qatab, as well as by Usamah ibn Zayd. Usamah ibn Zayd and Shukran, the Prophet's client, poured the water while Ali washed the body, covered as it was by Muhammad's nightgown. It was decided that the Prophet's body should not, under any circumstance whatever, be fully exposed, as they performed their washing contrary what usual. In each cases, the body emitted beautiful smells, so that Ali said continually, by God, what would I give for you, for how sweet you are and how wholesome you are, both alive and dead. Some Western Orientalists sought to explain this fair scent emitted from the body of the Prophet by calling it the result of the perfume which he used so lavishly. Remember that he once declared it one of the good things truly loved in this world. When the washing was completed, the Prophet's body was wrapped in towels, two made in Shuha and the third in Hibra and in Yaman. When this operation was completed, the body was left where it was and doors were flung open for the Muslims to enter from the mosque, take the last look at their Prophet and to pray for him. Undoubtedly, he emerged deeply moved and conscious of the terrible bereavement. The room was practically full when Abu Bakr and Umar entered the room and joined the Muslims in a funerary prayer for the Prophet. The prayer was performed without a leader. When it was over, Abu Bakr began to pray aloud, saying, peace, mercy, and blessings of God be upon you. O Prophet of God, be witness that the Prophet of God and his apostle conveyed the message entrusted to him by his Lord, and that he exerted himself and fought in his cause until God gave victory to his religion. We equally witness that the prophet of God and his apostle fully performed his promise, and that he commanded us to worship none but God alone, who has no associates. At the end of every praise, the Muslims responded together, Amen, Amen. When this prayer was complete, the men left, and the women and children took turns, but taking a last look at the prophet. One and all, every man, woman, and child, emerged from the room torn with sorrow and crushed by the sense of bereavement for the cross of the prophet of God, the seal of his apostles. They were full of apprehension that some calamity might befall the religion of God in the future. They even thought of calamity in the religion of God in the future. That's why the Muslims were so many Islam, 70 world groups. Who knows what group they belong to? Malaysia? You must know, you know. You cannot say you don't know. Malaysia? The Muslims belong to the Sunnis, correct. Sunnis, correct. If the Shiites were to come in, what happened? They jailed them. I think they were allowed them to come, but not allowed to preach. Okay? They start preaching, they'll be conflict. You know?